Yeah, you're right, Ludo. I was working on my video on how awful the Dark Souls board game is, but I came to this realization that, well, since we left the other channel, that an actual deep dive into the designs of Dark Souls in its entirety doesn't exist here on Second Wind, so here it is. So because we're going to be analysing the series as a whole rather than discussing the individual micro designs like in my other episodes, we instead need to focus on the macro. What are these games attempting to do? What is the tone and intent of their design decisions? In general, FromSoft worlds are designed in a way that feel apathetic to the player, making them feel small in a world that doesn't particularly care about their existence. If you don't have what it takes to complete your quest, someone else will. These games are incredibly intimidating when you first play them, making the player feel helpless, lost and afraid, because at their core, they're horror games. No, not like that. Not horror in genre, but in design technique. Mechanical fear instead of narrative fear. And all aspects of their design, from their levels, bosses and progression, are all designed to accentuate and come back to this central theme of fear. But first, how does this influence this series' level design? In all three games, you wake up in a world hostile and hungry, offered very little guidance in every corner, demanding your attention. And a lot of people think the level design of these games can be confusing due to how non-linear they are, but this is a misconception. Yes, they are non-linear in the sense that you are given choice in what areas you want to go to progress, but these individual areas are almost completely linear, moving in straight lines from A to B, from bonfire to boss. But FromSoft want the player to feel lost in a gargantuan, unforgiving world. But how do they make a player feel lost when the path forward is totally linear? By disguising that linearity with spiraling verticality. The player always travelling vertically in their climb or descent to demise, and this spiralling on a surface level disguises the fact that the player is moving in a straight line, but the verticality also breeds engagement through vantage, planning and false failure. Firstly, vantage. The verticality of these spirals allows players to look down on levels via strategically placed vantage points, spotting signifiers of alternate paths, enemy placements and where they came from and where they need to go, always being framed from these vantage points. But the most important implementation of these is how it allows players to plan. Most action RPGs simply consist of moving from room to room, tackling each threat as it is presented to you in a self-contained encounter. It's purely reactive gameplay, and Dark Souls does have this, but it's much more of a tactical RPG than it is an action one. Enemy packs and patrols are placed to be viewable from these vantage points to allow the player to plan their attacks, then formulate ways to ambush and navigate to gain an advantage, which adds a completely new level of engagement and decision making on top of the moment-to-moment action gameplay. But how does allowing the player to plan their attack route connect to fear and apathy? Well, it gives the player a chance to feel as if they're mastering these levels, but then FromSoft pull the rug out from under them. An advantage to this spiraling descent is how it draws the player into high and narrow paths, where traps, ambushes and simple failure will force them into lower points of no return. Trapped in a now unknown area, all of their plans now irrelevant, forcing them to ascend this same spiral, which completely removes vantage and planning from the equation, allowing the player to build up confidence and then rip it away, rebalancing this fear and tension. But this is false failure, because these points of no return usually spiral the player deeper into its levels, giving the illusion of failure and punishment while guiding them closer to their goal, creating this manufactured Ludo narrative of being lost. But tension cannot exist without having consequence for failure, and the conclusion for failure in most games being death, and Dark Souls uses its innovative soul system to permanently incubate this fear of failure. Souls are a universal currency that the player gains by killing enemies and bosses. They can be used to level up, upgrade their weapons and buy useful items, literally everything. But the player will drop all of their souls on death, and this is a harsh consequence for failure, creating a constant sense of tension that builds as they spiral deeper and deeper into these levels. As their healing items begin to dwindle, the amount of souls that they have increases. Every single aspect of its enemy and level design accentuates this tension, but once the player actually dies, this tension is released, and the developers are now out of tricks because the player is no longer lost. They know where the traps and ambushes are, so instead, FromSoftware replace it with a completely new way to rebuild that tension. When the player dies, they drop their souls on the ground, giving them a second chance to retrieve what was once lost, but also a second chance for tension, because if they die again, the souls are lost forever. Instead of the tension of exploring an unknown area, you're now in a fight for survival as you make your way to your lost souls, knowing exactly what dangers are lurking around each corner, waiting to rob you. If you do happen to die twice, the game is now out of tricks to keep this tension alive and has to rebuild it from scratch, but this is way harder now that the player knows the spirals, so ideally, on the first time through a level, they want to induce this tension but still have the player succeed, and this is where Bonfires come in. We've spoken a lot about tension in gameplay, but for it to be enjoyable, there has to be a moment of relief, and bonfires are that relief. And a bonfire is a form of checkpoint that the players will respawn at on death, and it's usually a long, arduous crawl to the next bonfire, perfectly spaced out to allow for this tension to build up, healing items running just low enough to encourage the need to search every corner for alternate paths to potential bonfires while the player is at that vantage. Then, when they finally reach one, this release of tension is intoxicating. The developers in every single level are attempting to craft tight cycles of tension and release, making the player feel an intense fear of failure through the soul system as they venture further from safety so that the player can get a release of adrenaline and endorphins when they finally reach that next bonfire. Well, yeah, I know you're not always going from bonfire to bonfire. Veteran players will know that you're not usually aiming for a new bonfire at the end of this spiral, it's a boss. So to create this tension and release, FromSoft has to loop you back to a bonfire that you started at. You've most likely seen this before. They use one-way shortcuts to loop the player back to the original bonfire, moving in a perfect loop. But just like with their spirals, they need to disguise this loop, and FromSoft do this by utilizing a form of illusion through Mobius loop level design. First off, what is a Mobius loop? Well, you can make one at home by affixing the ends of a rectangular strip of paper together after giving one of the ends a half twist. This is now a Mobius loop. It now has some really interesting properties. Firstly, it now has only one side. Instead of having two, the inside and outside faces of the loop, it now has one, being able to travel along the entire object's surface continually without ever leaving. What? Yeah, it's trippy, right? But how does this apply to Dark Souls level design? FromSoftware disguises their looping levels by utilizing the same kind of half twist, having a perfect loop but using a single point of verticality or false failure, spiraling the player deeper, confusing and distracting them from realizing that they're moving back to their original bonfire, allowing the player to travel along a singular path, never repeating or backtracking through an area, keeping this tension alive and perfectly disguising the fact that they are traveling in a perfect loop, taking it from a conventional circle to a confusing but easy to accidentally follow Mobius loop. And this can be seen throughout the trilogy. Coupling these spiraled straight lines and Mobius loop level designs, it allows for the world to feel sprawling and open, making the player feel lost and overwhelmed, but allows for the developers to have full control over exactly how they teach or challenge the player within each individual area. And that's not to say that these levels aren't complex, but FromSoftware do such a stellar job of subtly guiding the player. And a little tip for you, if you do manage to get lost, just look for candles. Candles will nearly always guide you to the path of progression. I think someone on the team has a thing for them or something. Like, I could just see Miyazaki now, just sitting at his desk. Mr. Miyazaki-san, we did some playtesting and players are getting a bit lost. What do you think we should do?
あなたは何をするべきかしています。
Right, yeah, what's this? It just says the word ad scribbled on it. What?
This video is brought to you by Berserk Bits, a net hacking auto battler launching on November 20th. Inspired by Digimon's Digivice and Mega Man Pet, Berserk Bits is an indie RPG auto battler and chip collecting game that sits at the bottom of your screen. What does BIT stand for, you ask? The Beijing Institute of Technology? Business income tax? Maybe. Bodacious iguana troubadour? Ho ho! Bit is your battle intelligent teammate, a digital buddy that will engage in combat and gather items, allowing you to build your deck with battle chips, upgrades, weapons, summons, and abilities. Use your bot's unique powers to explore new biomes and take down powerful virus bosses as you unravel the mysteries behind the attacks on the net. You can even import your own sprite sheets and create your own characters, all while you bounce on irritable teachers or bewilder itchy toddlers. Berserk Bits is out on November 20th, so if it looks like your acronym of choice, wishlist it on Steam, try the demo, and save the internet today, or you'll get belittled by idiots. Totally.
Oh yeah, you're right. We've just seen how to control player progression through its world, but how do you control a player's power at the same time? How do you balance an RPG like this? Difficulty is one of the most famous things about the series. It's intrinsic to the game's identity and even its marketing, and a lot of people think about it as difficulty for its own sake, but it all serves this mechanical fear. But managing this tension is only possible with manageable difficulty. But how do you do this in a game with non-linear progression? Well, the two things the developers need to manage is the amount of damage the player can output and how much they can receive, and FromSoft does this effortlessly through Titanite and Estus. Firstly, Titanite. Titanite is the resource used to upgrade your weapon as you progress through the world. They can be found hidden in its dark corners, and you need a certain amount of them to upgrade your weapon to the next level. The more you upgrade, the rarer and more Titanite it will cost. FromSoft gate the amount of damage a player can output by carefully placing a limited amount of these shards in each level, so they can precisely know how much damage a player can do at any point in the game, keeping that difficulty exactly where it needs to be to keep tension alive. Also, can I just say that tying rare Titanite upgrades to these little lizard boys that run away from the player is just ingenious, guiding the player in specific directions to more secrets, challenges, and false failure, further complementing the level design. It's chef piss, mate. The same has also been done with how you heal. Contrary to Bloodborne's counterintuitive blood vial system, don't at me, Dark Souls uses Estus flasks. At any one point, you can only have access to a set amount of them to heal yourself. And once you're out, you're out. And they can be refilled at a bonfire or if you die. But think of it as a counter for how many mistakes you can make during gameplay. But just like with the Titanite shards, the player can also find Estus shards, Firekeeper souls, and undead bone shards hidden throughout the levels to upgrade the amount of healing they have access to, accomplishing the same form of power gating on a per level basis while simultaneously encouraging exploration. Yeah, but that's all well and good. But where's the build diversity? Because for some, instead of craving the intrinsic difficulty these games offer, they instead enjoy having different ways to play it, and I am personally one of those players. I love finding new and interesting ways to tackle the game's challenges, and its leveling system seemingly allows players to pick and choose unique ways of playing, but when you break it down, it's not the leveling system that increases that enjoyment. Nearly always altering play is done by equipping new weapons or spells, having nothing to do with the leveling system at all, but being found through exploration. The leveling system is a way to gate players from accessing all classes and weapon types at once, but why? Why not just let the player experiment freely? Well, this could come back to mechanical fear. Resetting your level is difficult to do early on. The fear of commitment and making the wrong decision with your hard-earned souls is daunting, and that brings us to the main reason I believe this leveling system exists, which is souls. The main benefit to a leveling system is how it accentuates the fear of losing souls, aiding and carrying this mechanical fear. If there is nothing meaningful for the player to spend their spoils on, why should they care about losing them? The rush, fear, and frustration of losing souls is only possible by giving them meaning, and they accomplish this through its leveling system. But other than the obvious benefit, why does the leveling system exist? Is it a way to help struggling players brute force their way past the intended difficulty of the game? Is the leveling system a form of accessibility? Well, now we're getting into the topic of whether Dark Souls should have an easy mode, and I ain't gonna touch that with a, oh look, an 11-foot pole. We've spoken at length in this video about how FromSoftware rely on fear and tension to craft their levels, balancing player power as they play to keep a consistent difficulty. But should there be an easy mode in Dark Souls? Yes, but also no. It's a bit of a double-edged Zweihander. The tone and intended experience of a title is important. Everything is designed around it. Dark Souls' difficulty was the intended experience to accentuate the apathetic tone and tension the world exudes, and this would be destroyed through a default easy mode's implementation. But Dark Souls already has an easy mode because it has an adaptive difficulty system. The leveling system allows for players to make meaningful changes to how their character plays, affecting how much damage they can take and how much they can inflict, with enough time allowing them to brute force their way through this intended difficulty. But why doesn't this break the game? Well, this player-influenced adaptive difficulty system allows for the game to be designed for a baseline difficulty, designing everything around it, then allowing the player to influence that difficulty themselves by increasing what they personally need, keeping this tension high, but allowing struggling players to slowly overcome it. FromSoft have found a way to exude that tone of imposing challenge while making the games more accessible over time, and the fact that many players don't even notice this adaptive difficulty system is a testament to how well it has been executed. But the problem is that the player needs to already be able to play the game to even gain access to this adaptive difficulty. So the real question is, should Dark Souls have accessibility options to run alongside this? Yes, the answer is yes. Accessibility options allow players with a range of disabilities to access the games they couldn't otherwise, being able to customize controls or other options to suit their specific needs. And this could be done to Dark Souls. They could add accessibility options to, say, remove stamina costs or add a god mode so that you couldn't die. Would accessibility options break the tone and intended experience of Dark Souls? Yes, 100%. But these options are designed specifically for people who could not access the game in its original state, allowing them to delve into the beautiful worlds FromSoftware have designed. Do you love Dark Souls because of its perceived difficulty or because of the world and the stories that you were given to explore, carving your own path through this apathetic world? Adding accessibility options allows for more people to fall in love with this world at their own pace while allowing for the intended difficulty to still exist for a wider range of players. We all win because we all get to play. But what do you think? Out of all of the 3 Dark Souls games we discussed, which one has the best example of a Mobius loop level design executed well? And do you think the leveling system holds more weight than I was alluding to? And are you against adding accessibility options to FromSoft games as a whole? Let us know down below, because we'd love to discuss this with you. And just for a small update, I'm still working on more level design breakdown videos like this, but if you'd like to see me cover singular levels in more granular detail, let me know as well. And yes, I'm still working on my own game and beginning a dev diary series for it, so if you want small updates on how that's going, follow me over on X and Blue Sky. I'd love to talk to you over there. Alright, time to say goodbye, Ludo. Oh, she's asleep. Bye guys.